This is once again the morning meeting. Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone had a wonderful holiday. We're glad to be back with you. We'll be with you this week, throughout the week. So we're excited both in the morning for this program and at 6 p.m. Eastern time for two-way tonight. Dan, Sean, nice to see you both. How was your holiday?
Fantastic. And I'm excited to kick off the Advent season now that it's officially over. Music was blaring in the cars, got the tree. Now Christmas gets its due. But I had a lovely Thanksgiving. I love the kickoff to the season.
Same here. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's the best.
Dan, Sean, is your tree decorated or is it naked?
No, it has nothing on it yet. It just we I think we use that as an excuse to buy time.
Yeah.
But the poinsettias are out. You can see the
yeah. Can you pan over the tree? Is that possible?
No. Well, I can. Yes, physically it's right over there. Not that but it's hidden behind that wall because we got it last night. The kids got nothing. So,
all right, we'll be having
when it's in its splendor, maybe.
We'll be having live coverage of the Spicer Christmas throughout December. Only here exclusively on the morning meeting. As always, thank you for joining. If you're here on YouTube, thank you for watching on YouTube. Please, as always, particularly in this holiday time, peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace extended to all. Everyone gets two exceptions. I know some of you will be using your exceptions for Cash Patel, which is your right. But for everybody else, please, peace, love, and understanding. And if you're watching here on the two-way platform, congratulations on breaking the code. We're glad to have you here. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your electronic hand and we'll call on you soon after we kick things around a bit. For those of you who are brand new, this program is based on what happens at the network news divisions. Every morning, they gather their bureaus from around the world and listen to updates or what's in the news the day ahead, and then they kick it around. We'll be doing that here, and you get to listen in and participate. Thank you again for being part of Two Way. All right. Joe Biden is landing at about noon Eastern time in Angola. He's on a 3-day trip to Africa. He's not scheduled to take any questions, conveniently, despite making a fair amount of news last night by pardoning his son, Hunter. We'll talk about that. His press secretary is supposedly gaggling on the plane, and we'll learn about that when they land and they get access to some two-way communication, but we'll be curious to see. I'm predicting now, in whatever response the White House press secretary gives about the Hunter Biden pardon, she describes Hunter Biden as the president's only living son. That's my prediction, or only surviving son.
Hey, Mark, can I just because this audience probably cares more than ever, just so everyone understands what Mark just said, there's 13 seats on Air Force One. You get a print reporter, a radio reporter, a cameraman, and that's
13 seats for the media.
For the media. So when she goes back and quote gaggles on the plane, you stand in the back of the plane. There's pretty much 4 or 5 reporters that ask the questions because, again, you've got cameraman or photographer that represent the pool. So this is not, and she's doing it with Kirby today. So, I mean, this is literally like, if you're going to have to deal with this is the best deal possible because you're only facing realistically 3 or 4 real reporters.
Why is it that there's no ability of the media in the greatest country in the world, history of the world? Why can't the media file from Air Force One flying to Africa?
They can domestically. So when you're over US, you have Wi-Fi and you have the capability.
I understand, but why can't that plane be equipped to flying around the planet?
Yeah, I'm sure that was not an issue that they were worried about.
No, today. But I mean, regardless of administrations, I find it madness. And you can't always file from Air Force One, even domestically. Sometimes the Wi-Fi doesn't work. It just seems like, obviously, the president has communications on that plane.
Right.
You'd think the media would too, but they don't.
Well, so we'll see. There's a new Air Force One coming into cycle.
Yeah. You think that'll allow you to file as well as you could on a Delta flight?
I don't fly Delta very often, so I can't speak to their Wi-Fi capabilities. But I will say that, look, the number one priority on Air Force One isn't the Wi-Fi of the journalists in the back of the plane, just to be clear.
Not for the journalists, Sean. It's for the American people and the world. All right, enough of that. Thank you for that, Phil. The vice president, say it with me now, in Washington, D.C., where she will receive briefings and conduct internal meetings with staff. These meetings will be closed press. No public events for Donald Trump or J.D. Vance. The Senate's voting on stuff tonight. The House comes back tomorrow. They've got to deal with the must-pass bills of continuing resolution and a defense bill. We'll see where that ends up in the holiday season. And the First Lady has a very robust schedule. She's on a trip to Africa. She's unveiling the White House holiday theme and seasonal decor. She's got events at 11:45, and then 12:45 she's making remarks to offer her holiday message to the nation. Look forward to that. All right, guys. Hunter Biden pardon. There's so much we could say. We could spend the whole hour on it, but we're not because there's other stuff to talk about. Dan, your old boss, the governor of Colorado, one of the few Democrats to speak out first. No Democrats can like it. Leaving aside, if you want, you can. I mean, there's stuff to say. There's very little reporting on how did they do this. They didn't go through the pardon office. What did the White House counsel's office think about this? It's an extraordinarily broad pardon, et cetera. But just thinking forward-looking, what do you think are the main implications of Joe Biden's decision for things going forward for both him and for Donald Trump and the nation?
Yeah, I think it's just incredibly selfish. I think it's kind of like his initial decision to run. Going forward, the problem is you have put some handcuffs on the party against Donald Trump now. I mean, you have said what he said, kind of almost railing against his own Justice Department, that they're going after my son. This is about trying to break me. Like, he sounds bitter. And now when Trump says the same thing, Democrats historically have, it's enraged them. You know, no one's above the law, that justice is blind. And I think, you know, good for Jared Polis that he came out and said this. I think he's being honest. I think he knows it. And I think this will tarnish Biden's legacy. And I think it's very similar to his decision to run for re-election. You know, he said one thing publicly, then he just completely reversed his course with very little, you know, explanation. And if this is what he was thinking, then why say all summer that you're not going to do this and have the party go out on a limb defending you and then just yank it away when this was really kind of always your intention? It's just, to me, it's maddening.
Sean.
Yeah, I mean, the statement was absurd.
Yep.
Bottom line, it was absurd. The idea that his own Department of Justice, remember, this is the same Hunter Biden who got a sweetheart deal in the first place, right? And it was only Hunter Biden that undid that deal, no one else. So that's
well, the judge undid the deal
after he failed to agree to it. I mean, but the bottom line is because Hunter wanted a blanket immunity for everything that he'd ever done. Right. And the judge said, you understand this. But the bottom line is that this was not some political prosecution. Number two, as Dan said, I mean, up until the last couple of weeks, both he and Karine Jean-Pierre had gone out there repeatedly saying there was nothing to do. So this argument that every father, I mean, I think each of us are parents, we would kill for our children. But then why lie about it repeatedly and say, never going to do it, I stand by the Justice Department? I mean, you expressed 100% confidence in the system up until 10 days ago, and suddenly it's a political persecution. You've never had even a hint of concerns about the DOJ up until this weekend, apparently. The idea that it's a sweeping pardon for 11 years for crimes committed and unknown is really questionable. What else don't we know? And then the last 2 points that I would make are, for every Democrat who talks about background checks on guns, understand this: you can never, ever say with credibility again that we should have further background checks. You watched a guy lie on a federal background check to possess a pistol, which he threw away by a school, and you want to lecture the rest of us about gun rights? Never again. And lastly, I would be very, very concerned about the rest of the family and who else he pardons between now and January 20th. Brother Jim, others.
Maybe himself.
Maybe himself.
Yeah. So a couple other things besides what you already said. First of all, go ahead and put up number 107. I think that some of what you said, Sean, will be mitigated by pro-Biden, anti-Trump, dominant media bias. Semaphor's framing of the story in their lead item is that Democrats are praising it. That's how they led. Okay. And maybe they were going for a quirky lead, but the dimensions of this, the inappropriateness of this, and the degree to which he chose to save his son and handcuff the Democratic Party's ability to some extent to criticize anything Donald Trump does, including mass pardons of January 6th convicts, is mitigated by the fact that the press is going to cover this, I believe, largely this way. This is, to me, again, biased coverage. That's
Well,
not,
Mark, look
that's
at,
not
I mean,
the lead.
these,
That's not the
there,
lead.
there's a thread going out on that several of us are sharing on social media from Politico. First, president, this is Politico. President says he won't pardon Hunter Biden. Next, Biden issues pardon for Hunter. Next headline, Republicans pounce on Biden. It's like, it's our fault that he flipped. I mean, these people literally were lied to by the press office. And I'm sitting here as a guy who was who dealt with this for years, branded a serial liar. The guy said this over and over again. Corinne Jean-Pierre went on a lie, and now it's Republicans' fault that he betrayed them. I mean,
I think if he had just said, it breaks my heart to see my son go to jail, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life seeing my son in prison, fine. Then it's like, you know what? Oh, okay. Like, as a parent, I get it. Sean, you said, I think we would all do whatever we can to spare our children pain and suffering. But to rail against your own Justice Department after you railed against Donald Trump, for what he does, that to me is the difference between, kind of the politics of this going forward and the lack of leadership that he's showing in terms of how he's handing, off the baton to the rest of the party. To me, it's just almost a disgrace.
So the funny thing is, and I don't want to get ahead of our own agenda here, but if I were Biden and his team, at least find an excuse, right? This is where the tone deafness comes in on this, which is, why not say, I'm concerned that Donald Trump's going to go after my son, and the rhetoric hasn't toned down since then, and therefore I'm going to save him. But I mean, blame somebody else, for goodness sakes. I mean, this is politics 101. I can't believe it.
Yeah, and I see people are saying, like, the only reason he went after him is he's Joe Biden's son. Guess what? When you're president or running for president, people come, like, that is, ask the Clintons about all the stuff that they went through, right? Ronald Reagan and his family went through, the Bushes went through. Like, tell me a president who has, or a candidate who has run, they go through your family, they go through your friends, they go through everyone. It doesn't mean you just all of a sudden say, I'm going to pardon everyone because the Justice Department is totally corrupt. I think the Democratic Party is better than that. And that's what's very disappointing.
Right. So let me say a few more things and we got to move on. First of all, it is true that you can come up with cases of people who did what Hunter was accused of doing and they weren't charged to the same extent. There are cases like that, but there are also cases that are comparable where people were charged. Joe Biden chose to run knowing that his son had done these things. Joe Biden lied in the debate about whether Hunter got money from China. Joe Biden lied about whether he went to meetings with Hunter's business associates. Joe Biden lied about his family receiving money. He chose to run knowing his son had an addiction problem and that this would put the spotlight on his past activities that he knew about and lied about whether he knew about them. So you want to talk about culpability and responsibility. You want to talk about loving your son. If my son were an addict and had done what Hunter did and Joe knew he did, I wouldn't run for president. So if he wants to say who's responsible for this, he can blame his own Justice Department. He can blame the independent counsel. He can blame the judges. He can blame Donald Trump. But he's responsible for his surviving son's plight right now by choosing to run for president.
And can I add to that? Jill Biden, who encouraged him to run, the senior staff around him that encouraged him to run for re-election, all knew this. And so for all the Biden family and everyone else to say, like, woe is us.
Yeah. When he said in the debate, my son never got money from China. Okay. He was already a candidate, but he set this in motion. He made it impossible for it not to be investigated because his son did get money from China and he knew it.
But there are two fundamental problems with the whole Hunter issue. That the crimes that he has been found guilty of are two issues near and dear to Democrats. Correct. Gun control and the rich paying their taxes. Correct. Hunter violated both of them, and they've been silent on both of them. Outside of Jared Polis, who just had an issue at least with the pardon, where are the rest of these Democrats coming out and saying, we have fought for gun control, further background checks, and this is wrong? We believe that the rich should pay their fair share in taxes. This is wrong. Like, it's, again, the card is gone. I will make sure that every Republican gets a little card that says reference Hunter Biden the next time you get asked about this.
All right, let's move on. And again, if you want to ask questions about the Hunter Biden thing, as I suspect some of you do, please raise your hand. All right, Kash Patel intention to nominate, not formally nominated as far as we know. Pete Hegseth facing now a New Yorker story, which I did not send around a link to because I haven't confirmed the reporting in it. Sean, where do those two nominations stand?
So I'll take the cash one first. At the end of the day, this is I've harped on this before. The use of the word by the media of qualifications is inaccurate. Kash Patel was Deputy Director of National Intelligence. He was Chief of Staff to the Department of Defense. He was Senior Director on the National Security Council. He was a public defender at the Department of Justice. To say he is unqualified is patently false. You may not like him. You may not like his stances. You may disagree with his position. But it's patently false to say a guy with that kind of expertise is not qualified. I think that the issue that you have with Kash is a personality one with the Democrats and the media. So therefore, I actually think that he gets through. The bottom line is, and I've noted this online, just for everyone who understands the DOJ, excuse me, the FBI director has 3 years left on his term. Real quick reference point, when Biden got into office, he fired myself and everyone else from the service academies. We filed a lawsuit and they went to court and affirmatively argued, and the court agreed with them, that they had the right to fire any appointee. That is now codified in law because the Biden administration actually argued for it, which gives the president absolute authority to fire anyone. So we're going to take that issue off the table. Trump will fire him day one. Kash will get confirmed unless there is some personal thing that comes out, because right now it's all about policy and personality, not qualification. On Hegseth, so far, again, this is not there. There's unsubstantiated allegations from a previous employer, which until they become substantiated, there's proof, there's a witness. I still think he gets confirmed.
Dan.
So I think for Patel, I'm going to borrow a line from the great Mark Halperin yesterday. Is it reform or revenge? I think the issue is not what Democrats in the media. The issue is about a dozen Republican senators who are relatively silent so far. And even Senator Rounds, I think yesterday when he spoke, was somewhat defending the FBI as an institution. I think if Patel can say, like, these are the reforms that I'm going in to enact that's going to make the FBI, a better operating agency, then maybe he's able to squeeze through. But I think if his thing is we're going to go in there and blow the whole place up, the vast majority of the FBI is good people. They're honorable. They have integrity. They are there for the right reason. And I think if this looks like a grievance fest to eliminate a body of the Department of Justice that is legitimate and helps keep us secure and safe, I think that there will be Republicans who will take down his nomination. And I think on Hegseth, it's the same. I think he's teetering, but I think Patel may save him. I mean, there's only so much fire you can train if you're MAGA, and there's only so much attention that other Republican senators, I think, will give to take on Donald Trump. So I think Hegseth may now ultimately benefit from this.
We talked early on about whether if one went down, which Gates did, that was the sacrifice to the confirmation advising consent gods, or whether it would embolden the dozen or so Senate Republicans who might vote no on controversial nominees. Right now, my spidey sense is it's the latter. And that Rounds is kind of the public face of this group of 12 senators who could vote no, who I think today, if they voted, would vote no on both of those guys. I think both those guys need to come to their hearings and do a good job. Not all 12 would vote no, but enough would vote no to stop them.
The difference you have with Gates is that they knew that they had a report that they could would at some point
100%.
And so that's where I say that's why I'm trying to make the distinction between Hegseth, is that until you have a piece of paper or an actual witness.
100%. Right. But both of them have some qualifications, but Sean, neither of them have the kind of qualifications that most people nominated for those positions have had. They don't have their critics overstate their lack of qualifications, but they don't have the full qualifications that most people have had. Patel's been in a lot of jobs, but he was in them very briefly. Okay. If you don't count his time as a lawyer, which again is not really a qualification. Being a public defender is great, but it's not a qualification to run the FBI. I think his controversial statements also need to be addressed.
Yep.
And the fact, look, just because Bill Barr says somebody's not qualified in Trump's orbit, or John Bolton says it, doesn't make it true. But there are other people who don't as routinely criticize, who have criticized him. I'm not saying he won't be confirmed. I'm not saying he shouldn't be confirmed. I'm saying I think both of them are going to have to perform to not lose 4 Republican senators, and they may well. And
Yeah, I mean, can I also add that, and Sean, you would know better than I, but it sounds like there are people in Trump's orbit who don't like Patel, that the knives may be out a little bit that are going to help feed information to Republican senators.
You saw that in the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal story today has that.
Exactly.
That's rare to have anonymous Trump aides inside the tent saying this may not have been the right pick.
Yeah.
All right. 2 things we want to talk about regarding Democrats. The first is this interview that we haven't talked about that was done by the senior officials on the Harris campaign with the Pod Save America podcast, which was an interesting venue choice since that podcast was very critical of the campaign. Dan Pfeiffer conducted the interview. And amongst those, many Democrats criticizing their failure to admit apparently any mistakes was someone named, a lawyer named Ben Yellen. Let's put up 101, please. So just show you some of the tweets that Mr. Yellen put up last week as he was listening to the interview. Somewhere between disappointing and enraging. I would not hire these guys. 102, please. Defensive. We did great. You still lost. Number 103, please. The more I listen to it, the worse it gets. Fully discrediting. Every 5 minutes, they reference the fact the campaign was short. They didn't have enough time. All right. To paraphrase the great Alvy Singer, we happen to have Ben Yellen right here. Please bring Mr. Yellen in. Ben Yellen, tell folks what your relationship is to the Democratic Party. Are you a Democrat? Are you a independent? What are you? There you go.
I'm a Democrat. I'm a partisan Democrat who was.
All right. Thank you for being here. And you voted for Kamala Harris.
I sure did.
And you're a lawyer in private practice, and you teach law?
I am. I do legal consulting, and I am an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland Law School.
Happy holidays to you. Really grateful to you for joining us.
Explain
in totality why you found that interview to be so not good.
I thought that this was an opportunity after you lose an election like this to really have some introspection, to look at what went wrong. There are some big questions in terms of policy, what went wrong with things like blue state governance, and there are a lot of good people in Democratic politics who are looking at those bigger questions. And what was so frustrating to me about this is these individuals who are working on the campaign were in position to have the most information out of any of us. They saw all of the data, they were there, but all they gave us was defensiveness, self-righteousness, excuse making. It reminded me a lot of the Chicago Bears coach, if anybody saw what happened with them last week, where they made this terrible error at the end of the game that cost them the victory. And they interviewed the coach, who was fired the next day. And he was like, well, we ran the play we wanted to run, and it just didn't work out. And it's just not an acceptable answer after a campaign like that. And I think it's a missed opportunity to have some real introspection.
Yeah. Ben, stay with us and chime in. Dan, I've described the people in that interview not as all-stars, but as Hall of Famers. And Ben says they should never work on a campaign again or never be hired again. What say you?
Yeah, I think there's 3 parts to this. There's the campaign, the party, and the candidate. I think on the campaign side, well, let me just cut to the chase. What hangs over the whole entire interview is the candidate.
They never blame her once.
No, and when they
to the contrary, they talk about how great she is.
Yeah, and when they say like the incumbent was really unpopular and we did everything we could to differentiate, but then it's like, oh, by the way, she didn't really want to try to differentiate on anything specific. The trans ad, which they spend 30 minutes on, they tie themselves in a pretzel saying, well, it didn't actually move any undecided voters, but then, oh, by the way, it made her seem out of touch. And David Plouffe says it's in her own effing words. Like, okay, she didn't want to separate from the candidate. She is incredibly liberal. She was not good in interviews. They basically say, oh, we did tons of interviews, but nobody talked. And they're like, we're trying to define ourselves. We're trying to, but she couldn't really speak in the interview. She couldn't really put points on the board. And so I just found that, and look, I get it. They're not going to come on and be like, our candidates sucked and we're great. But I think, to Ben's point, there's no admission of anywhere that the campaign made mistakes. And there is just no discussion of the candidate. And I think as we talk about the future and her possibly running again, to me, it's like it's horrifying that the party kind of doesn't want to just talk about her performance as a candidate when we look to the future.
Sean.
Yeah, I mean, your point earlier, Mark, the venue that they chose, you went on a podcast that was extremely critical, and then you didn't answer the fundamental questions. The whole thing sounded, really looked awkward. And I think that Ben's take on it was probably the take of most Democrats who found it tone deaf. I agree with everything that Dan said.
Ben, what are your thoughts about Democratic Party chair? Are there any candidates in the race you like, or anyone might run you like, or the type of person you think would be good?
The person who appeals to me so far is Ben Wickler, who I think has done a really good job in Wisconsin, which is a tough state for Democrats, given how many rural areas there are. And he has a pretty good record in races won there. I think a lot of other people have made this point. It's less of an ideological position than somebody who can be strategic and knows how to win elections. And so to me, he's the one who has the record to stand on thus far.
Ben Wickler go ahead.
No, Ben, if during the interview on Pod Save America, Pfeiffer said something to the effect of, hey, look, I'm not going to crap on Kamala. She was my boss, and I just don't believe in that. I'm a loyal guy, and punted, would that have helped?
I think so. I think there are areas of Harris's own performance that are worth examining, not as a way to blame her, but as a way to understand how the party can do better in 2028. The reality is she's not good in an interview format. I think they realized that at the beginning of the campaign, and they took a gamble by not having her do any media for the first 6 weeks of the campaign, which I think turned out to be a big mistake. So I think you have to address those weaknesses in order to better prepare for 2028. Can we find somebody who can handle tough questions?
I think the reason I asked the question is it goes back to this idea of when she was asked about areas where she disagrees with Biden. You can do this in a respectful way. In the same, he could have handled this in a way that doesn't undermine the credibility that of her, whatever, or is demeaning to her in a way that says, look, there were some issues, and I shared those with her privately, but I'm not going to do it publicly because I respect her as my boss and as the current vice president, which is reality.
Ben mentioned Ben Winkler, probably a pro-Ben bias, but I do believe that even though Ken Martin, go ahead and put up 108, please. These are four of the folks who have thrown their hat in the ring. There's a couple others. Ken Martin, you see there, is the current chair in Minnesota. Ben Winkler's a current, and he claims he's got a huge number of endorsements from DNC members already. I'm sure he does. Ben Winkler, who Ben Yellen mentioned, take that down and cue up 109, please. Ben Winkler, I think, is the front runner because he is so well thought of. And if they're going to go with an insider, if they're going to go with one of their own, not somebody prominent, he has done a great job of uniting the party in his state, of not being ideological, as Sean said, but of simply saying, I'm going to do the nuts and bolts, and I'm going to talk about the things Democrats have in common that don't divide the party. So let's go ahead and listen to a little bit of Ben Winkler, 109, please.
I'm running for chair of the Democratic National Committee because we need to unite, we need to fight, and we need to win to stop the GOP from ripping this country apart and ripping off working people to enrich mega billionaires who funded Trump's campaign. This is a time for Democrats to come together to learn about what we need to do and change, and to start winning elections up and down the ballot for the next 4 years. Part of uniting is a conversation in the party. We want to hear from everyone about how we ensure that our nominee is poised to win the general election, how we honor our coalition and the traditions of our party, and plan for victory. So as the chair of the DNC, I'll be helping bring together a conversation with the key states and all the DNC members across the country. If you're a DNC member, I'd look forward to a chance to try to earn your vote. And for all Democrats, this is the time for us to map out in every aspect of what we do how we contain the damage that Trump and the Republicans are going to try to inflict, and then win elections in all 50 states.
So Ben Yellen, we got the beard, the glasses, the name Ben, come as you are hairstyle. You might need to recuse yourself, but just talk a little bit more about why you think he's the right choice.
To me, it's the record. I mean, he's led Democrats to victory in some of those big state Supreme Court cases, which are off cycle. So they're in difficult times of year where you wouldn't expect Democrats to turn out well. And Democrats have been very high performing in those elections. Compared to the other swing states, particularly Pennsylvania, he got Tammy Baldwin across the finish line there. The margin in Wisconsin, relative to how far the rest of the country shifted right, it was really less than a 2-point difference from 2020, which is pretty remarkable. So it's the record that he has to stand on. I think it's very well respected in Democratic circles, and I think that's going to give him a huge advantage in this election.
Yeah, Dan, what do you think of Ben Winkler?
I think his fellow Ben said it well. I mean, he's got a record of success, and I also think, you know, some of the candidates are talking about we need to change our message, and that is not the job of the DNC chair. You're not going to tell Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and, you know, Jared Polis and Gavin Newsom, like, this is what you need to say. Like, I have the secret sauce. The message part, the party will figure out. The members, the elected officials around the country in Congress figure it out. But as Ben just said, the track record in Wisconsin and in Minnesota of organizing, of bringing in different factions. I mean, the fact that Tammy Baldwin is a gay member of Congress from the progressive part of the state, won a state that Donald Trump won, like, they're doing something right. She is doing something right. The party is doing something right there. Now, I think there are arguments to be made that even in Wisconsin and Minnesota, you're shrinking into the urban core and kind of it's like a wall around it. And we need to kind of get out into the other parts of the states. But I think they both have a track record and they're worthy of consideration.
Sean.
I want to just echo something that Dan said. One, at a national level, the party's really focused most on logistics now. It's making sure that voter lists are maintained, that data is so there. I've done this. I did it for 6 years at the RNC. There's the leaders are basically like, every time you stick your head up on messaging, like, thank you very much. Please go back to your corner. So he can help coordinate, or she, whomever you guys choose. But I think, and then the second thing is, I would just equally say sometimes state parties get a little bit too much blame and a little too much credit. I mean, there's only so much a state party does when it comes to a candidate. A candidate who is not good cannot get pulled over the finish line. Conversely, a really good candidate, I mean, there's only so much that the guy can do. But I do think that I'd be interested. The Minnesota one, the other Martin, is where I actually would be intrigued, because I think this is going to be an inside baseball game. It always is. And I would put my money on him.
So two things. First of all, I'm constantly mispronouncing the other Ben's last name. It's Wickler, not Winkler. He's a very talented guy. I followed his career closely. I think he's spectacular. And by the way, if you're a Democrat, we'd love you to raise your hand and weigh in on all the stuff we've been talking about. So let's get some more Democratic hands up, please. We'll call on you shortly. I dissent from this view. I think Wickler will probably win. But I continue to say the Democratic Party, which doesn't want to deal with the legacy of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, both as office holders and candidates, you can look at the exceptions to what you guys are saying. Ron Brown, Haley Barbour are exceptions. National figures who came in and helped drive message. They didn't dictate it, but They talked to their party leaders and they said, where is the unifying message? You think, and again, I say this with respect to Mr. Martin and Mr. Wickler, you think if they walk in and tell Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and Jared Polis, they're going to help coordinate the message, that they'll let them know. They'll say, go raise money, go work with the state parties to build a voter file. I think the Democratic Party needs a Ron Brown. I really do. Because if in the absence of that, these governors all have day jobs. None of them are Bill Clinton or John Edwards or Barack Obama level of I'm running and I'm gonna dominate. They're much more ambivalent. And so I think it's a missed opportunity if they give it to somebody like that, as talented as he is. Dan.
Mark, I agree. I mean, I think the best candidate is that's why I said they deserve a consideration. I think Rahm Emanuel's the best candidate. I mean, Rahm is aggressive. He gets it. He gets mechanics. He gets strategy. He gets how to deal with Schumer and everybody else. He understands the line, and he would give the party a shot of confidence. He would give it like, I'll mix it up. I'll get us in the fight. I can win some fights. And the party, I think, is going to need that, particularly, as you say, as we try to move on from kind of the disaster of Joe Biden.
Ben,
I'll tell you, as a Republican, I would fear Rahm the most. I agree with Dan.
You would. Ben, how would the far left of the party feel if Rahm ran?
Not well. They would not take it well. They disapprove of his record as mayor of Chicago. He's kind of seen as a squishy centrist. I read the book. I think it came out in the late 2000s, The Thumpin', which was about the work that Rahm Emanuel did setting up the Democrats for their success in 2006. And it was pretty ruthless, but you can't argue with its effectiveness. It picked up 30. Yeah.
Wait, Ben, can I ask you a question, though? Mm-hmm. What is it about his time as mayor that troubles you?
Not necessarily that it troubles me. I mean, there was this high profile, I think it was the Laquan McDonald shooting, where there was a lack of police accountability. I think his reputation as a Clinton centrist Democrat through the Obama era wouldn't sit well with the activist left. Now, my opinion is that we shouldn't listen to the activist left. I want to win. So Rahm is certainly intriguing as kind of a ruthless operative, but you have to balance that with, do you want to make the base angry with this decision?
Yep.
All right. Stay with us, Ben, because we're making you honorary co-host today. Nicholas, welcome in.
Good morning.
Tell folks where you are and what's on your mind, please.
I live in New York. I've been here before. So I'm
Yes,
glad
sir.
to see
Dan,
Sean, you guys again. I voted for Harris, as you can see. I had a couple of things. Two things. One is the Hunter Biden pardon. I was looking at news and I understand your point, Dan. I listened to you intently this morning. I just find it laughable that Republicans, at the outcry, if I'm being honest with you, this is a party, the Republicans, who supported President Trump, who has 34 felony convictions, who was impeached twice, who's a convicted felon, and who pardoned Jared Kushner's father, who did horrible things.
but he also served his time.
I get that. Okay, I get that, Mark.
Meaningful difference in the pardon game.
Okay, I see that. But he did pardon him, and then he appointed this man just now ambassador to France.
Yeah.
So, in my humble opinion, I'm like, let Joe Biden pardon his son. I find it laughable coming from Republicans based on the people that they support. Now, I get we are a better party. I get the hypocrisy of this. I'm not a father yet, but when I do become a father, hopefully someday, I feel for Joe Biden. His reputation's already tarnished by a lot of people in the party who blame him for Kamala's loss, because I blame him for Kamala's loss, to be honest with you. So I just laugh at the faint outrage I feel about this, right? That's just my personal opinion.
Okay.
I understand that.
We'll respond to that, but make your second point, please.
My second point about the party, I am a progressive Democrat. I supported Bernie Sanders. And there's actually a New York State senator who's running for DNC chair, James Skoufis, who I haven't met him, but I know a little about him. I think he's a dark horse candidate. I do think Ben would be the best choice. I'm not in favor of Rahm. I just don't agree with you as a progressive Democrat. The Laquan McDonald thing is like disqualifying to me. I think he's a corporatist. I think the Democrats need to learn how to fight. Republicans fight. Right? When they get into office, they don't care what Democrats think, right? Like, we are caring right now about this Hunter Biden part, but when Republicans get into office, they do whatever, and they don't really care. Democrats, we feign, oh, well, we can't do this, we can't do that. I want some of the Republicans fight. So I was like, Joe Biden, stand on your message. You want to pardon your son? Go ahead. Fight. You're gone in 2 months, all right?
Nicholas, stand by. I know Sean's going to want to mention that the Democrats have so little fight in them that they only indicted Donald Trump 4 times. But Sean, reaction.
That's a good point.
Then Dan, then Ben.
I want to Yeah, I'll second the comments of the gentleman from New York, Mr. Halperin. I don't think that Democrats have done a bad job fighting. Second, the one issue I would take with your point, Nick, is I think Donald Trump has shown us how to fight. I don't think Republicans know how to fight. In fact, Republicans generally know how to roll over. It's Donald Trump that has given us a backbone and said, it's time to fight, and I'll show you how to do it. Up until him, I don't know a single Republican. Well, that's not true. I don't know many Republicans that would fight the way that he did. And the normal playbook was apologize, beg for forgiveness, make a donation to some leftist cause. Now we've learned how to fight and win, and I think that's a big change for us as a party. I will just say this, and to your point about Rahm, and I hope you don't choose him. There's a difference between where you stand on the issues and winning. And the job of a party, in my opinion, is to chalk up wins, I mean, to Ben's point about the Chicago football coach, I mean, that was a time management issue, blah, blah, blah. And you fire the coach. You say, if you don't understand what it takes to win, then you're out. And party's job is up and down the ballot to win. And so my point is, if I were looking for a new chairman for my party, all I'd want to know is, what are you going to do to win more races, to invest in them, to worry about the logistics and the mechanics of winning, of recruitment, of training, things like that, because they're not out there to be your message guru. That's going to get overshadowed. Chuck Schumer will block you from every camera from Florida to Maine on the East Coast if you think you're going to get involved in the messaging. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Nicholas, I think there's two things here. I think that on the party chair, look, Rahm is, the reason he's feared is he is a fighter and a winner, to kind of take your desire and Sean's, point together. Now, what you say about his record, and Ben said this as well, as mayor or as a member of Congress, like, okay, that is a debate we can have. But if the issue is who is the best fighter and winner, to me, Rahm is almost unmatched in the party. On your first point, though, about the pardons, had Joe Biden said basically this summer when asked, like, well, it's an interesting question and I'll get back to you on it, which is kind of what Trump does, right? He's like, well, I don't know enough about it. I'm going to get back. And then Trump comes out and basically says, kiss my ass, I'm going to do it, right? And if you want to fight, I'll fight you on Twitter. I'll fight you at a press conference. I'll fight you anywhere and I'll kick your ass. Joe Biden came out and was like, no, never, no rule of law, like no one's above the law. Like, let's talk about Trump and how he breaks the law, which is kind of what you did. But that's not what, and then the whole party came out and said for months, no one's above the law. Like, I think some of the Trump attacks were because he was running for president, right? The papers, the porn star payment. I think January 6th was legit, right? In my opinion, others will disagree, and what happened in Georgia. But then to come out and just pull the rug out on 6 months of messaging, that is where I think Biden failed. That, to me, and others may disagree, but it's hard to square that.
Ben.
Well, first, the only thing I'll say on the pardons is I feel very sorry for Karine Jean-Pierre, who's going to have a tough time answering questions on this. Sean, I know you've been in that position, and I do not envy her. On the chair, I think, Sean, your point about just doing what it takes to fight and win is a really good one. And that's something that I didn't always see in the current chair, Jamie Harrison. I mean, in the 2 or 3 weeks after the debate debacle that Biden had in June, he was fighting with Nate Silver on Twitter about Democratic convention procedures. It was not a productive use of his time or anyone's time. So I think you do need to have that just win at all costs attitude. That is really the only job requirement of a party chair, besides being able to raise a lot of money.
Well, can I make one other point, though, on party chairs? There's a big difference between being the party chairman with an incumbent president and being the party chairman out. When you're the party chair and you have the White House, your job is to do what the president and his political team tell you to do. And we had a Republican chairman during the Bush 43 early on that didn't get the memo on that and was rather quickly moved out. When you're the out of party chair, you have a lot more latitude and you respond to their members. In the RNC, we have 168 members, and they are your board of directors, and that's the only people you care about for those 2 to 4 years that you're serving. And I assume the same is true with the DNC. But that mission becomes very different when you've got an incumbent president.
Yeah. Nicholas, thank you again. Derek, welcome, and tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Derek. I'm in North Carolina, and I'm a huge Trump supporter. Volunteer, would love to work for the man if I had the opportunity. And you gentlemen touched on this a little bit earlier, and this is, I think, best posed as a statement. And I would like to get Sean's response as well as you guys. So there's a lot of fight around the confirmation appointees, and a lot of the opposition. Really, what matters is your own party. Like if you can get over the finish line with those 2 or 3 Republican senators. And for me, it feels like, or I feel that a lot of that opposition is either they don't personally like that nominee or Trump, or some form of outside influence like lobbying, conflict of interest, et cetera. And I reached that conclusion because only a third of the Senate is up for re-election. Only a small number of those seats are even competitive. If you're in a competitive district and Trump delivers on the economy, immigration, peace overseas, you're going to win going away. So it seems like the thing that's in your best interest is to give those nominees to Trump as quickly as possible. You should be working 16-hour days, 6 days a week to get them all through before he even shows up. So I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on that, and if my reasoning is sound.
Are you still in the Army, or how long were you in?
I'm out. So
yeah, I think. Look, I agree with you. I think it depends on the state you're from. And I mean, like in the case of like Collins and Murkowski, like we understand where they stand personally or politically. In the case of Susan Collins, she's only got so much latitude. In the case of McConnell, it's personal, right? But this is all a game of math. And we have 53 seats. You need 50. The JD Vance would be able to put you over the top. And so the one difference that, again, this goes back to I think, I'm not sure if it was Ben that made the comment last time, but Trump has shown that he will fight for his people, not just for them, but against you if you are against him. So that's what even a guy from a safe district, to your point, where the politics has been tweaked a bit, is that if you come out against Trump and you're in a safe red seat, I mean, you're from, Montana, he will come after you. So they're fearful of a primary. And it's a legitimate concern. So I think for all these nominees, the bottom line is they're trying to figure out, how do I get to 50? How can I keep, because Susan Collins will be with a bunch of them. I think it's, the obvious ones are going to be the ones of concern. But Rubio will sail through, and Doug Burgum will sail through. I think Elise Stefanik sails through easily. I mean, they're eminently qualified, well liked. The other ones are going to be where you have some issue. And so I don't know. Again, this is a pure math issue for most of these guys. How do I keep 50 on the table?
And if you were in charge, let's take someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who might be a little bit controversial, who's pretty universally popular with both parties. Like if you were advising Trump and it seems like she's going to get met with some opposition, what would you do?
So, I mean, the first thing you do is you do a matrix, figure out who's with you, who's against you. It's a whip count, right? So these are the folks that have already said they're with us. I mean, Bernie Sanders, I think, is going to be a vote for her. You figure out, I mean, are the 2 Hawaii senators for her? Is one of the 2, but again, it's no different. It's a math equation. How am I getting to 50? And I think with her, she might pull potentially 2, 3, 4 Democrats with her. She obviously, there are some Republicans that have expressed concerns about her meetings, especially with the head of Syria. And what explanation does she have? Can she assuage them? I don't know. I don't think that the concerns are as big with Tulsi as the media would like. And I think that my guess is that she ends up with 53, 54 votes.
Look, I'll just add, though, that, they're a separate body, and you make the judgment with the information that you have that you think is best. And you think about what will be the politics in the future, but both, both parties, almost every president since the founding of the republic has been frustrated by Congress and frustrated at the approval process, how slow it goes, people who cross them. Look, I remember when Democrats thought something similar when Obama came in 08. Like, if you're against us, like you're the Clinton wing, like the tide is in a different direction, like we're going to own the party. So get on board or get out of the way. And 2 years later, it was really, really smart if you had been opposed to some of Barack Obama's picks early on. So that's not to say Trump will be in a different place in 2, 4, or 6 years, but they'll make the judgments. Senators and governors tend to know their states better than even maybe Donald Trump. Sometimes that's wrong. And Trump is ahead of them, and some are in the political graveyard because of it. But, both parties, this is what happens.
Ben, anything you want to say?
One thing I would say, just from a Democratic perspective, is there's kind of a boy who cried wolf effect. I think if you go scorched earth against every nominee, then you're going to be taken less seriously on the ones you really want to fight against. I think it depends on the Democratic senator. For me, it would be RFK Jr. that I'd go to the mat against, because I care a lot about public health. But I think you kind of have to pick one or two that you're really going to fight, and not kind of act like the sky is falling when we're talking about a Doug Burgum or a Marco Rubio.
Derek, thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Hey, Mark, can
Hey,
I
Yeah.
just real quick? Christine in the chat was asking, just sort of, we brought up KJP and what she would say on the over this whole issue with the pardon. And I mean, to be honest with you, it's a pretty easy answer, which is just the president made his views clear in his statement. And I'll go back to that. I mean, in this case, it's an easy pivot back. I don't think, and I think because of who's on the plane, and sort of the media reaction so far, I don't think anyone's going to blame Corinne Jean-Pierre. I really don't. They're not going to look at her and say you lied to us, because they're going to say this is all Biden. And she can point back to the statement. So I don't think you're going to see any recriminations for her whatsoever.
Oh, I think at least some reporter's going to say at some point to her, is going to say, on what did you base your answer?
Yeah. And if I'm her, I say, I mean, I don't think anybody doubts.
Then you have to call out the president for lying.
Right. But I mean, my point is that again, I mean, maybe it's PTSD here, but the bottom line is the job of the press secretary is to speak in lieu of the principal when they're not available. And she says, president made his view clear for months on end. I reiterated that. He made a very personal decision over the Thanksgiving weekend while meeting with his family. And he expressed those views very clearly in the statement.
So let's play action on you continue in your role. I'll pretend to be a reporter. So the president lied to you and put your credibility at stake by sending you out to lie to the American people. Is that what happened?
If it's me or if it's KJP, because I can give you a word salad. But if it's me, I would just say, look, the president's thinking has evolved. He made it very clear in the statement why he thinks that happened. And I would refer you back to that over and over again. The president expressed to me at the time what his thinking was, and I reiterated that to you. That was the most accurate information and truthful at the time.
All right. Haley, welcome in.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, you can see where you are. You're in Texas and you're
Yes.
an online voter. Thank you for coming back. What's on your mind?
Thank you, guys. Just because I've never been on the morning meeting, I love you, Dan. You've become easily my favorite Democrat. Sean, I've loved you forever.
Thank you.
And you're
So
taking a liking to Ben.
Sorry?
You're starting to like Ben. Your first exposure to Ben.
Yes, of course. I love
Yeah.
everybody in the two-way community. So
All right. Welcome in. What's on your mind? Thank you.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit just because I've had for the last couple of weeks something on my mind. And especially with what's going on in the Middle East now, the things are looking like they're hopefully starting to calm down. So I have, it's like two kind of points, basically. I am very much want to vote Democrat. I'm one of those voters who can be picked up easily from either side. Like pro-choice, pro-gay marriage, pro all, what mostly the Democrats have been valued forever. However, since October 7th, I just cannot align myself with the party, especially after the Senate vote that did thankfully get turned down when it came to arming the embargoes, Bernie Sanders bill in Senate. I'm just waiting because I know that the Democrats some are looking inward and they are looking at like let's say, the critical race theory part of their party. They're looking at the things that have affected them in this election. I don't think they realize how problematic the anti-Semitism problem is on their side. I will say that there is anti-Semitism on the right, and that's why I didn't vote for Trump. I want to make that a statement, and because I'm worried about Tucker Carlson and the power he has and all of that. But I am really worried that this issue is being swept under the rug for the Democrats. I'm never going to stop talking about it because I want the party to go back. I want just the fact that anti-Semitism, it cannot be a bipartisan issue. Like, I'm not talking about Israel because I think criticism of Israel, I am Israeli, but criticism of Israel is open to everybody. But when it comes to the college campuses, the bills that are being passed, the AOC blaming AIPAC for losing elections, it's a huge problem, and I don't think that they're even looking at it or even mentioning it.
Let's let everybody react to that. Go ahead, Dan first. Thank you.
Sure. So Haley, great. Thank you for raising your hand and coming on for the first time. You did a great job. I think the reason it's not being talked about is it may be the deepest fissure within the party right now about where to go. And as you can imagine, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, this is a very tough spot for them, right? They are from New York. Chuck Schumer is Jewish. He has prided himself historically on being the best advocate for Israel. And yet he has a colleague in the House that's only about 5 miles from where he lives in AOC who has a very different viewpoint on, some of this stuff. Richie Torres is getting ready to run for governor. And if you read the New York Post or X, is almost every single day highlighting anti-Semitism and the party's need to speak up. I think you will see more of a debate about this. I think as the 2028 candidates start to move around the country, they're going to be asked about this. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, who really, is the one for this applied, trying to make everybody happy, you make nobody happy. And this thought that they could straddle the line and 1 minute leak that we scolded Netanyahu in private, and then the next minute approve an arms sale to Israel doesn't, like, everyone looks at you and says WTF. So I don't know which side the party's going to choose. I hope it is being against anti-Semitism and for our democratic ally in the Middle East, as much as they may make us really upset sometimes. This is what happens. But I don't know if that's the direction the party's going to go, and that makes me very worried.
Yeah, I'm with you. It is amazing to me that this is where the Democratic Party had ended up. I would assume, considering the huge constituency that exists, never mind that it's the right thing to do, that this would have been a no-brainer. And I'm shocked by it. Politically, I'm happy. I'm sad for our country, though, because I do think that geopolitically, and like I said, there's innumerable reasons why we should be standing strong with Israel. And the anti-Semitism is probably number 2 or 3. But geopolitically, what this means to the Middle East, supporting them, standing firm with them. Again, I could just go off on this for a while, and I'm amazed that the Democratic Party has chosen to split the way that they have, because I don't know that it's as tough as they would. You can respect the lives, the Palestinian lives that are and worry about the threat of innocent civilians being killed. But at the end of the day, how this whole thing started, to me, is not even close to being a debatable fact, with the killing of innocent women and children and civilians.
Well, I think another problem is it reminds me a little bit of some of the social justice turmoil a few years ago, where the party didn't really know what it wanted. It was just upset. It was upset about the George Floyd killing. It was upset about, some other incidents where innocent people appeared to receive, treatment that you wouldn't want on your child. But what outcomes we really wanted, we didn't know. And I think now there is a feeling of as Sean said, innocent civilians, Palestinians are being harmed. We don't really know what we want. We're just outraged and lashing out at Israel. And by the way, you know, this, you said both parties. I mean, one of, like, we forget now, but when right after October 7th, like a month later, Trump came out and said to apparently to Netanyahu, like, hey, it's a bad look that so many innocent people are dying. Like, you need to kind of worry about that. But by the way, like, finish the job, right? I mean, so as you say, you can express like a, hey, it's not 100% black and white, so to speak. But I don't even know the party knows what it wants. It's
Haley,
just
thank you for coming. We're at time, so we hope you'll come back and bring up more topics in the future.
Absolutely. All the
Thank
time.
you. Really
Every
appreciate
day.
it. Ben, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Hope you
for
had an
having me.
enjoyable experience, and we hope you'll come back regularly too. And
Thank you.
we loved how honest you were in your tweet thread. That was great. Thank you. Gentlemen, Sean's tree undone. But if you go on X, you can see Dan and company, Dan and his family decorated their full tree, kind of spectacular. The bar is set high.
Forest family fun.
Spicer plan. Thank you all for coming back and joining today. I'll be back tonight at 6, and the three of us will be back tomorrow, two-way tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern, and then the three of us will be back tomorrow. And we're here all week. So thank you for coming back and have a great day. And I'll see you at 6. Gentlemen, I'll see you guys at 9.
See you tomorrow.